Hey y'all, you read the news, right? I read the news. Why are you asking though? In fact, I read the news more than ever these days, and I am the news more than ever. Okay, what I mean to say is that independent journalism is bigger than ever, and if you have a very forgiving definition, I count as an independent journalist. And that's a good thing, but also a bad thing, because independent journalists, while their roles vary from being gatekeepers of truth to profiting off of ads. So today I want to trash talk what's behind all of this, behind the news, and what it all comes down to is this: finance. That sounds kind of lame. Okay, what it comes down to is this: the economy of journalism. Yeah. What it comes down to is money, 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 as ABBA famously said all the way back in the 70s. Yes, ABBA was talking about the economy of journalism in that song. Look, here they are, having a serious discussion with Professor Noam Chomsky about manufacturing consent. Anyway, okay, this is the last title slide of the video, I promise. The economy of independent journalism versus mainstream media. Boo! Ooh. I'm booing because there's a lot of issues with mainstream media. And if you're on social media, you probably know what I'm talking about more than ever. In fact, smart people have written about this already. How mainstream media outlets are at the mercy of the big corporations that own them and fund them. That's right, big corporations have a big say in what topics mainstream media decide to write about. And these topics are, to some extent, all shaped by the interests of their wealthy owners, basically. Just like this little guy. Who's a good dog? And if they aren't, well, the outlets still need to turn a profit. Now, historically speaking, news outlets made most of their money in the 20th and 19th century from ads placed in their newspapers. It actually used to be very lucrative to own a newspaper back then. But then, the internet happened and things started to change, of course. Now, ads, they still very much shape what content is news and what isn't. Like, you can't have a piece going on about the horrors of factory farming in your newspaper and then have a big McDonald's ad on the next page, right? Well, you can, but no one's gonna invite you back. And you don't want to be that guy. Of course, there are also other cool examples of mainstream media outlets like the BBC, who are in large part funded by the UK public through a TV license. Now, the BBC also gets some funding from the UK government, and that's a really fine line they're walking because a lot of people don't trust state-sponsored media. But anyway, back to the internet. When it started out, it was this cool democratized space where anyone could basically make their own blog and just decide what to write about. And scholars have even argued that the internet also looked way cooler back when it started. Now, when newspapers decided to go on the internet, it wasn't a big problem for them. They could still make money from ads and subscribers like they used to, especially the ones that embraced the online space early. But, then slowly the internet morphed into this thing that we have today, where just a few big platform companies seem to dominate the biggest share of surfing the World Wide Web. Which also unfortunately means that there are less and less websites like lingscars.com. If you know, you know. It's actually kind of crazy. Like, just think about what internet websites you go on when you go on the internet. It's, I'm guessing, probably mostly Google, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Netflix, Disney Plus? No. Okay, what does that mean for the news environment, though, that these big platforms dominate so much? Well, I'm glad you asked, because instead of relying on ads that fill up entire pages, or their loyal customers, or, their rich owners, who's a good boy? Mainstream media outlets also rely on their articles showing up on Google search, or even your grandma sharing whatever article on her Facebook page. And it doesn't stop there for the poor mainstream media outlets. Because when someone clicks a link on Google or Facebook that redirects to the news article's website, Google or Facebook take a bit of that sweet ad revenue, and less goes to the mainstream media outlet. And this has become a particularly big issue these days with these new AI summaries, because when you don't even click the link, none of the money goes to the content that originally comes from these news articles, because no one clicks the link, and so the ad revenue all goes to, for example, Google, which I love Google, by the way, which is really convenient, and I'm also starting to use these AI summaries more and more, but sometimes it does tell you to eat 1 rock per day, so you probably shouldn't trust it all the time, unless, of course you like rocks, or if you're having an argument with your idiot friend and the AI answer says you're right or whatever. Or at least click that little source button that it gives you so you can double check whatever it is that you're reading. Well, honestly, what do I care? I think we're all going to be replaced by AI robots in an AI autocracy that preordains our entire lives. I think. Don't quote me on that, actually. Anyway, the point is, nowadays, a lot of mainstream media outlets are struggling to turn a profit because of big platform companies. News just isn't as profitable as it used to be back when we had physical newspapers. And that's also why a lot of local news outlets are dying. They're being bought up by these vulture capitalists, which is a great term, by the way, that buy a news outlet just to squeeze it for the last cents it has and then toss it in the garbage. Anyway, this has been a particularly big issue in countries like Canada.
It's the perfect texture for running, very low impact on its dry snow so your feet don't get wet.
Hey, where I live, usually I'm not there right now, obviously. It's winter there right now and very cold.
Sledding, just enjoying it. One thing, oops.
And it's also soon to be the 51st state of the US, apparently, according to this guy. Who is this guy again? I see him all the time. In Canada, and Australia too actually, legislation has been passed so that Google and Meta have to share more of their ad revenue when someone clicks their link. And, I'm sorry, Facebook. I really hope you can stay afloat with just your $130 billion revenue that you got in just 2023. In Canada, Google actually agreed to do this, but Meta just straight up banned Canadian news on Facebook and Instagram, which left your grandma with a deep void that can only be filled by AI slop and your visits. And we really don't want that now, do we? But okay, let's not try to be too harsh on the old Zuckerberg, He's probably just trying to be less responsible for when his algorithms literally lead to genocide. Yes, that was a thing that happened. Mark is trying to be this cool new guy. Just, look at him. He's like transformed. He's a new himself. Shaka bra. You know what I'm saying? Mark, if you're listening, can you just give me $1 million? This YouTube thing just isn't quite working out yet. Oh, that's actually a great segue into how independent journalism is funded and the precariousness of it all that I definitely didn't plan. Yeah, so independent journalism generally doesn't pay very much, unless you get big grants from philanthropists. Anyone out there? Guys? There are a few different ways that independent news outlets fund their news. Of course, they also rely on ad money, but their sources of income are usually quite different from mainstream media outlets. On the one hand, we have news outlets like Novara Media, which is a great outlet in my opinion actually, that rely on small donors to keep them afloat and fund their news, basically through websites like Patreon, for example, which I actually also have. What a coincidence. And thanks to Nadia Shah for pledging $3 a month to help fund my journalism. Actually, really, really appreciate it. Nadia, you are the MVP of this video. Anyway, this is a pretty common business model for a lot of alternative media outlets and single journalists in your area. And it's a good thing actually, because just like the BBC, it means that these outlets aren't reliant on big corporations without having some corporate actor decide what is appropriate to say and what isn't appropriate to say in the news. And on that note, there's also guys like Max Blumenthal from the alternative media outlet The Grey Zone, who reached conclusions about the October 7th attack months before a lot of mainstream media outlets weren't even willing to look at the evidence. But, to keep their operations operating or whatever, these alternative media outlets, well, they rely on an active fan base that are willing to fund the news they make. And that's precarious. And on top of that, alternative and independent media outlets are still very much at the mercy of platform companies that decide whether to promote their content or not. No one is going to donate to this small outlet if they don't know they exist. And finally, after mainstream outlets, alternative small outlets, we have independent guys and gals like me, just one person trying to make something newsworthy on YouTube and do their best to say something that's true. Now, because we're doing this thing alone, a lot of independent journalists who operate by themselves are completely overworked. And I wouldn't claim to be, but more serious journalists definitely are. And on top of that, because we rely on platform companies like YouTube or TikTok to kind of host our content, we're very reliant on making something clickbaity as well. Meaning we have to make these stupid titles and stupid thumbnails so people actually watch our video. Basically, we're trying to exploit the new way that a lot of people are getting their news on social media. For that. For independent journalists like me, the decision of the algorithm to promote my content or not is basically make or break. Unless I had universal basic income, actually. Mark? Now, these algorithms usually just have the one goal, to maximize user engagement. And you'd know that if you watched my last video. Did you? Shame. Shame on you. That's great, shaming my viewers, Marcus. Now, no one really knows how the algorithm prioritizes certain videos, but on YouTube, it's likely to be the mix of the click-through ratio, which is just how many times your video thumbnail gets clicked on when it's shown to people, and the average view duration of that video. If the YouTube algorithm notices that a certain video has really good performing statistics, it's gonna push that video to more and more people because, of course, YouTube just wants to make more and more people watch so they can get more and more money from advertising. That's basically how it works. So people like me have to try to maximize user engagement because if we don't try to exploit it, no one is going to watch our content or read our content. For example, my most popular video, the slime mold video here, has 160,000 views around, and coincidentally it also has the best statistics of any of my videos. 15.4% of people who see it pop up click on the thumbnail to watch it, and on average those people watch 50.4% of it. So if I was a bit more success oriented, I'd probably focus on doing more of these shorter science videos. But unfortunately, I don't really want to. I don't believe in science, after all. But a lot of content creators, or so-called journalists, well, they just have that one goal to make successful content so they can make that money. Even though what they say might not be truthful or accurate. You know, at least when it comes to people who work in mainstream media outlets and also alternative media outlets, they usually have some sort of training because they've been hired and screened, and they have this kind of classic adherence to the truth and other journalistic values that make journalism a good thing for democracy. And I know a lot of people don't do this and they're influenced by the field very quickly and by success and status and all this, but it's a lot easier for someone who's just making content by themselves, a person like me actually, to not give a shit about what they write about because they don't have this training basically. And I'm guessing that someone who's gone in and studied journalism and all that and gone through this training, well, they have some sort of desire to tell the truth. Whereas on YouTube, a lot of these new independent journalists, well, they don't give a shit. And I'm doing that master's degree. And I'm not that guy, okay? Like, I'm making a video about the economy of journalism. Like, who the f*** is gonna watch this? If you are watching this, actually, what the fuck, dude? No, but seriously, do you, like, maybe want to hang out sometime? Or, like, I don't really care, but... Anyway, to round all this up and to kind of make the point of this video clear, how journalism is funded shapes not only the content we consume, but also the role of journalism itself. Whether it's about challenging powerful perspectives or just bringing new perspectives into light, or on the other hand, being a mouthpiece for basically the highest bidder. In the end, in our world that's kind of driven by clicks and likes, the journalists who actually make this content are facing more pressure than ever financially and have less and less incentive to make content for the right reasons, meaning the content that they produce is likely to be shittier, basically. So I just want to leave you with this question. Who's really in charge of the stories that are written, and what motivations are behind all of them? Thank you so much for watching. Namaste.